What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel and welcome back to our video. Today I'll be taking a look at the official 2025 Daytona 500 entries. I'm going to go through all the full-time entries and part-time entries that are confirmed for the 2025 Daytona 500. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We're going to start by talking about the 01 car for Ware Racing. This will be driven by Corey LaJoie, who will be attempting to qualify for the Daytona 500 this year. Corey LaJoie will also make select starts in this car throughout 2025. Now, Corey LaJoie is a pretty good super speedway racer. A lot of his top 10s and top 5s have come as super speedways in NASCAR Cup Series competition. I think Corey LaJoie has a really solid chance and a really strong opportunity to make the Daytona 500 this year. Up next, top of the one car for Trackhouse Racing. This one once going to be driven by Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain's a pretty dang good super speedway racer. He came very close to winning the Daytona 500 in 2024, got turned with a few laps ago, and was up front around 3 or 4 laps ago in the event. I think Ross Chastain has a really good chance and opportunity. He won at Talladega back in 2022. I think Ross Chastain, with his aggression, will definitely be a big factor for the win this year. Up next, top of the 2 car for Team Penske. This one once again be driven by Austin Cindric. Austin Cindric is looking to win his second Daytona 500 in 2025 as he won it back 3 years ago in 2022. Austin Cindric is one of the best super speedway racers in the field and has got to be one of the favorites going into the 2025 Daytona 500. I expect Team Penske to be really fast and strong, and if Austin Cindric can survive the carnage and incidents, I think he will be a factor to win the Daytona 500 this year. Up next, top of the 3 car for Richard Childress Racing. This one once going to be driven by Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon is looking to win his second Daytona 500 in 2025 as he won it back in 2018, nearly 10 years ago after dumping Eric Almirola for the win. I think Austin Dillon will have a solid chance and opportunity to win this year. The RCR cars have been super strong at super speedways, so I expect the speed and pace to be there for the RCR cars. I think Austin Dillon could have a chance to definitely win his second Daytona 500 this year. Up next, top of the 4 car for Front Row Motorsports. This will be driven by Noah Gragson this year. Noah Gragson has been pretty solid on super speedways in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and came close to winning the 2023 Cup Series race at Talladega Super Speedway. We know that Noah Gragson is going to be a factor to win the Daytona 500 pole if half-fast the front row cars have been at qualifying at super speedways, but the big question will be, can Noah Gragson survive the carnage and be a factor? We'll see what he can do this year. Up next, top of the 5 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This one once going to be driven by Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson has not been the best super speedway racer in the field. However, in the Daytona 500, Kyle Larson's actually been quite competitive. He came close to win the Daytona 500 in 2017 after running on the gas all white flag. And I think that Kyle Larson has a good chance and opportunity to win this year. He will also be a factor to win the Daytona 500 pole in 2025. I do think the Hendrick cars are going to be fast and strong, and I could definitely see Kyle Larson winning the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, top of the 6 car for RFK Racing. This one once going to be driven by Brad Keselowski. Now, Brad Keselowski is one of the best super speedway racers in the field. However, the one race that's eluded Brad Keselowski in his career is a Daytona 500 win. He's never been able to get it done at this point. If Brad Keselowski doesn't cause an incident on the racetrack, I think he's got a really good opportunity and chance to win the Daytona 500 this year. I do expect that the RFK cars are going to be strong and fast and really won the Daytona 523 and also back in 2022. I do think Brad Keselowski will definitely be a pretty big factor to win the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, top of the 7 car for Spire Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Justin Haley. Justin Haley has won a Daytona before, back in 2019 in the summer race after a lightning strike came down on the racetrack near the end of the event. Justin Haley is a pretty dang good super speedway racer. He will definitely be a factor this year to be a contender. The Spire Motorsports cars have generally been pretty strong on the super speedways. They may not be the fastest when it comes to qualifying trim, but I think when it comes to the race pace, I think that Justin Haley has a great chance and opportunity. And I definitely think he will be a major factor and contender to win the Daytona 500 if he can survive the carnage this season. Up next, top of the 8 car for Richard Childress Racing. This will once again be driven by Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is looking in his 20th try to win his first Daytona 500. And Kyle Busch is probably the favorite currently at the moment to win the 2025 Daytona 500 because one, Kyle Busch in the historical side of things, but number two, Kyle Busch has been really strong in the next-gen era at super speedways. He nearly won a Daytona the last time we were there, and I think he'll be also a factor as he came close to winning the Daytona 500 the last 2 years as well. If Kyle Busch can have luck go his way, this could be the race to turn it around. I do think that he will be a major factor to win the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up at the 9 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott is coming off of winning the 2025 Cookout Clash. The last time we saw a driver win the Clash in the Daytona 500 was 2016. And the last time we saw a father-son duo win the Daytona 500 and the Clash around that time, I think may have been not Dale Sr., but Bill Elliott also won the Daytona 587 after winning the Clash. So I do think that Elliott is going to be a factor to do it this year, and I expect the 9 car to be really strong as it'll be fast this year. Up next, up at the 10 car for Kaulig Racing. This will be driven by Ty Dillon in 2025. Ty Dillon is someone that I don't expect much from this year, to be honest, all around the board. I think Kaulig has a decent super speedway program, but I do think, like I said, I am not expecting much from Ty Dillon in 2025 in this year's Daytona 500. We'll see if he can prove me wrong and show the pace and speed, but I don't think Ty Dillon will be a major factor in this year's Daytona 500 with the 10 team. Up next, up the 11 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This will once again be driven by Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny Hamlin is a 3-time Daytona 500 winner and is a great super speedway racer. However, in the next-gen era, Denny Hamlin has not been a massive factor and has never been a major contender to win those races. He also lost big sponsorship from FedEx going into this year. He will have, of course, National Diaper League sponsoring this year. We'll see what Denny Hamlin can do, and we'll see if Denny Hamlin can finally get that 4th Daytona 500 win, trying to become only the 3rd driver in NASCAR Cup history to accomplish that. I think he definitely has a chance to do that. Up next, up with the 12th car for Team Penske. This will once again be driven by Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney is one of the favorites to win the 2025 Daytona 500, as Ryan Blaney came very close to winning the Daytona 500 in 2022, and Ryan Blaney's also won a Daytona before, back in 2023, and has won a Talladega 3 or 4 times at this point. If Ryan Blaney doesn't get caught up in a wreck like he's done the last couple of years, I do think that he'll have a really good chance and opportunity. I expect the number 12 team to have the pace and speed, and I think Team Penske is going to bring it to try to give Ryan Blaney that Daytona 500 win. Up next, up with the 16 car for Kaulig Racing. This will be driven by AJ Allmendinger, who moves back up to the NASCAR Cup Series this year. AJ Allmendinger had some decent speed in last year's Daytona 500, but I'm not sure if that is going to translate to the 2025 Daytona 500 this year. AJ has won Xfinity races at super speedways, but has never won a non-road course in the Cup Series. We'll see if AJ can be a factor in serious contender, but I think it definitely would be a top topic to see if he can do that this year with the Kaulig Racing organization in the 2025 year. Up next, up the 17 car for RFK Racing. This will once again be driven by Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher has been really strong at super speedways in the next-gen era and also won a Daytona in the summer race in 2023. I think if Buescher's up front, he is going to be a factor. The RFK cars took a little bit of a step backwards in 2024, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I do think that Chris Buescher will definitely be a factor to be a major threat this year, and we'll see if he can survive the carnage and be up front in this year's Daytona 500. Up next, up the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This will once again be driven by Chase Briscoe. This will be Chase Briscoe's first Daytona 500 with Joe Gibbs Racing, with Bass Pro Shops being the sponsor on the car. Chase Briscoe, in my opinion, he was decent last year in super speedways, but I'm not sure about him being at Joe Gibbs Racing. It seems like the JGR cars in the next-gen era, they've generally not had the consistent pace and speed to be up front in these past Daytona 500s. But I think there's definitely a chance for Briscoe, and we'll see if he can try to win the Daytona 500 this year. Up next, up with the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This will once again be driven by Christopher Bell. A couple years ago, I didn't rate Christopher Bell on super speedways, but he's definitely gotten better at super speedways in the next-gen era, as he, of course, won a dual race in 2024. I think that Christopher Bell has a decent chance and opportunity, but it's going to depend on luck, and sometimes Christopher Bell's luck has not been there over the course of the last couple of years. We'll see what Christopher Bell can do, and we'll see if he can definitely try to have the opportunity to win the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up with the 21 car for the Wood Brothers. This will be driven by Josh Berry in 2025. Josh Berry's been solid at super speedways, and he's getting in the car that won last year at Daytona with Harrison Burton, who goes back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series to take over that car from Hailie Deegan this year. Josh Berry was really fast at Daytona before unfortunately flipping upside down. I think the 21 car is going to have decent pace and speed. This car has been really solid on super speedways over the course of the last couple of years. I think Berry does have a chance to be competitive this year. Up next, how about the 22 car for Team Penske? This will once again be driven by Joey Logano. We know that Joey Logano is one of the best super speedway racers in the field. However, Joey Logano has not won a Daytona 500 since 2015 and has not won a super speedway race on a traditional super speedway track in nearly half a decade at this point. Luckily for Joey Logano, he's been up front every time. If he could put himself in a position to be a contender, I think he then has a chance and opportunity to win the Daytona 500 this year. Up next, how about the 23 car for 2311 Racing? This will once again be driven by Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace has come very close in the past to winning the Daytona 500, going all the way back to 2022, where he finished second and lost by nearly 1/100th of a second at the end of the race. He has a new crew chief this year in Charles Deneke. I really think that Bubba Wallace, if he can be up there, I think he will be a major factor. I think the 23 team has gotten better on super speedways as well, and I think that Bubba Wallace will have a really good opportunity here and a really strong chance to win the 2025 Daytona 500 this year. Up next, how about the 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports? This will once again be driven by William Byron. William Byron is coming into this year's Daytona 500 as a defending race winner. And William Byron is one of the most underrated super speedway drivers in NASCAR Cup Series history. He's got 2 wins at Daytona, has 2 wins at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And William Byron is always in position as he nearly won at Talladega last year in the fall. I do think that William Byron could be a serious factor and serious contender to win the 2025 Daytona 500 this year. Up next, up with the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports. This will be driven by Todd Gilliland, who moves from the 38 to the 34 car this season. Todd Gilliland had a breakout season on super speedways last year. He led a ton of laps at Daytona and Atlanta, and the 34 and 38 cars really showed a lot of speed. This car, of course, won the Daytona 500 in 2021 with Michael McDowell behind the wheel. He looks to take that 34 car to victory lane and see if Front Row can pick up what I believe to be their 3rd career or 4th NASCAR Cup win at this point. I do think that Todd Gilliland will be somewhat of a factor to be a contender at this year's Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 35 car for 2311 Racing? This will be driven by Riley Herbst, who joins the team on a full-time basis in 2025. Riley Herbst has been pretty solid in super speedways in the NASCAR Cup Series, and I think he's going to be a pretty big benefit at this year's Daytona 500. He will have Devin Restivo as the crew chief this year. I do think that Riley Herbst has a decent chance and opportunity, and I do think he'll be pretty solid and pretty competitive as he looks to win his first Daytona 500 this year. Up next, how about a 38 car for Front Row Motorsports? This will be driven by Zane Smith, who returns to Front Row Motorsports in 2025. Zane Smith has been solid, at least in the truck series, as super speedways. He won here, of course, back-to-back in 2022 and 2023. And his 38 car with Todd Gilliland has been pretty good at super speedway races as well. I do think that Zane Smith is going to have a solid chance and opportunity to win the Daytona 500, potentially if Front Row can be up front, or who knows, he might get caught up in a wreck. We'll see what Zane Smith can do with this year with Front Row Motorsports. Up next, how about the 40 car for Junior Motorsports? Yes, Junior Motorsports will be entering the Daytona 500 and will be attempting to qualify for the first ever NASCAR Cup Series event this year with Justin Allgaier behind the wheel of the car. We do think they're going to have the best chance and opportunity to make it on speed next Wednesday, and I do think the 40 car will be very fast. It's unknown at this point if this car will show up any more races in 2025. We don't think they are going to be at this point, but I think it's pretty awesome to see that Junior Motorsports and Justin Allgaier are going to be entering the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, how about the 41 car for the Haas factory team? This will be driven by Cole Custer, who moves back up to the NASCAR Cup Series this year. Cole Custer's been okay at super speedways in the past. He's never been a major factor and contender to go to victory lane, but I think that with RFK help, that might change this year. I think Custer could be someone to keep your eyes out on, and we'll see what Cole Custer can do, as I do think he has a decent chance and opportunity to make it in 2025. Up next, up with the 42 car for Legacy Motor Club. This will once again be driven by John Hunter Nemechek. John Hunter Nemechek is someone that I don't highly rate at super speedways. He hasn't been always fast at these types of tracks and kind of struggles in them in the NASCAR Cup Series. If he can survive the carnage, he might get a solid and good enough finish. But like I said, I'm not expecting much from the 42 car this year at this year's Daytona 500. We'll see what John Hunter Nemechek can do as he'll look to try to win the 500 this year. Well, I'm not expecting him to do that this year in 2025 with Legacy. Up next, how about the 43 car for Legacy Motor Club? This will once again be driven by Eric Jones. Now, unlike John Hunter Nemechek, I have a lot more confidence in Eric Jones. Eric Jones is one of the most underrated super speedway drivers we have in NASCAR today. He's taken that 43 car, been up front, and made moves of super speedways that drivers should not be able to accomplish and not be able to do, and has been super fast and super impressive at these types of tracks before. I do think that Eric Jones has a good chance and opportunity, and I think he will be a solid factor in serious contender if Legacy can bring the pace and speed in 2025. Up next, how about the 44 car for NY Racing? Yes, NY Racing will be attempting to qualify for the Daytona 500 in 2025 with JJ Yeley behind the wheel. This team is going to need a lot of good luck charm, especially with the depth of the open cars that is going to be running for this year's Daytona 500 in 2025. Just JJ Yeley nearly ended up making the Daytona 500 last year, but just missed out. I think it definitely will be an uphill battle for him to make the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, how about the 45 car for 2311 Racing? This will once again be driven by Tyler Reddick. A couple years ago, I did not rate Tyler Reddick as super speedways, but he has definitely improved a lot as super speedways in the last couple of years. And I think Tyler Reddick could be a sleeper to be up front this year. I think there's a chance and opportunity for the car to be fast and really, really competitive. We'll see what Tyler Reddick can do as he looks to win his first ever Daytona 500 in the 2025 year and season with the team. Up next, up with the 47 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Reddick and Stenhouse Jr. While the driver hasn't changed, the team has changed. Luckily, Reddick and Stenhouse Jr. is a former Daytona 500 winner back in 2023. He is looking for his second Daytona 500 in 2025. And I do think that Reddick and Stenhouse Jr., with how good he's been at super speedways, I think that Stenhouse will be a major factor in serious contender to contend for the Daytona 500 this year. Again, it depends on how the carnage is out on the racetrack, but I definitely think he's got a good opportunity to win the Daytona 500 in 2025 with Hendrick. Up next, up with the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman came very, very close to win the Daytona 500 in 2024, losing it only by inches with the caution being thrown seconds before he made the pass on William Byron. He's looking for revenge this year. He's been close to winning Daytona 500s in the past, and I think Alex Bowman will have a good enough car, capable enough to being up front and being a contender, considering Hendrick Motorsports has been very good. He also will contend for the Daytona 500 pole, most likely. I think the Fit 48 team will bring the pace and speed for him to be a contender at this year's Daytona 500 in 2025 year. Up next, up with the 51 car for Ware Racing. This will be driven by Cody Ware, who joins the team on a full-time basis in 2025. Cody Ware, to be fair, the last time we ran at Daytona, he actually got a top 5 finish. I don't think he's going to do too much throughout most of the 2025 season, but I do think that at least this weekend, next week, he will have a chance and opportunity. We'll see what Cody Ware can do with the number 51 team as he looks to be a sleeper pick to win, but I don't think he will be a major factor in the Daytona 500 this year. Up next, how about the 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This will once again be driven by Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs has not been the best super speedway racer throughout his NASCAR career. He's never been a major factor in Xfinity super speedway races and has never been a major factor in Cup super speedway races because generally his luck has not been very good with these teams. Maybe he can turn his luck around and change his luck at these types of tracks, but I think it will be an uphill battle for Ty Gibbs this year. He looks to win his first Daytona 500, but I'm not expecting him to do that in 2025. Up next, how about the 56 car for Trackhouse Garage? Yes, Trackhouse Garage will be attempting to qualify for the first ever NASCAR Cup Series event with Mark Truex Jr. behind the wheel, with Bastard Shots being the sponsor for the car. Mark Truex Jr. is going to have a lot of help from the Toyotas, and Joe Gibbs Racing is going to be preparing the car for this year. It is unknown at this point if this team will show up at any more races past the Daytona 500. I could see them opening up a full-time Cup program down the road, but I think Truex, who will run the 500 this year, I think he's got a chance and opportunity. We'll see what Mark Truex Jr. can do as he looks to make Daytona 500. I do think the 56 car will have solid pace and really good speed, and it wouldn't shock me if he's able to make the Daytona 500 in the 2025 year. Up next, how about the 60 car for RFK Racing? This will be driven by Ryan Preece, who joins the team on a full-time basis in 2025. Now, we all know a couple years ago, Ryan Preece had that big flip at Daytona on the backstretch. But he's going to a better team this time around with RFK Racing. I do think that Ryan Preece will be someone to keep your eyes out on in this year's Daytona 500. If he can be up front, be in contention, I think the 60 team is going to bring the pace and speed that they're really going to need to be major factors and contenders in this year's Daytona 500. I think they'll have the speed. The 60 car was really fast with David Reagan last year. I think it'll be a pretty strong car in the 500 this year. Up next, how about the 62 car for Beard Motorsports? This team will be attempting to qualify for multiple races in 2025, including the Daytona 500, and Anthony Alfredo is going to be the driver for this car. This car could be a sleeper pick to make it in on speed on Wednesday. They have been very fast qualifying their way in the last couple of years, but I think it could also be an uphill battle with the competition coming in on the open side. Luckily for Anthony Alfredo, I think I'll have a good chance and opportunity. We'll see what Anthony Alfredo can do in the number 62 car for Beard Motorsports in 2025. Up next, how about the 66 car for Garage 66? This will be driven by Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith will be attempting to qualify for this year's Daytona 500, who replaces Mike Wallace, who was the original driver behind the wheel, for NASCAR denied him that opportunity. Chandler Smith has been solid at super speedways in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and the Truck Series for a couple years, so I could definitely see him having the chance and opportunity. Now, he did fail to qualify back in 2023, but I think especially with Doug Yates and the Roush Yates engines coming in pretty closely, I could definitely see this leading to Chandler Smith making the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 71 car for Spire Motorsports? This will be driven by Michael McDowell, who joins the team on a full-time basis in 2025. Michael McDowell is one of the most underrated super speedway racers in the field. He won the Daytona 500, like I already mentioned, in 2021, and I do think that Michael McDowell could definitely be a pretty big factor to win if the Spire cars can be up to speed. If they show that pace and speed they're really going to need, I could definitely see Michael McDowell winning the Daytona 500 with Spire Motorsports for the first time as he looks to win his third NASCAR Cup Series event in his NASCAR Cup Series career this year. Up next, up the 77 car for Spire Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Carson Hocevar. Carson Hocevar is going to be super aggressive, but he's also not a bad super speedway racer, as he has been a contender, at least on the Cup side of things, but unfortunately last year's Daytona 500, he crashed on not even 10 laps into the event. If he doesn't have any major problems, I think he could definitely be someone to watch out for. We'll see what Carson Hocevar can do as he looks to try to win his first ever NASCAR Cup Series event in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 78 car for Live Fast Motorsports? This will once again be driven by BJ McLeod, who will be looking to make the Daytona 500 after missing it in 2024. BJ McLeod showed some really good speed at super speedways last year and was honestly very, very impressive. He's going to have a tall order in making the Daytona 500 2025, but I do think that the 78 team will have decent pace and speed as they look to qualify for the Daytona 500 this year and season. Up next, how about the 84 car for Legacy Motor Club? This will once again be driven by Jimmy Johnson, who will only make 2 NASCAR Cup Series attempts in 2025. Jimmy Johnson has a decent chance and opportunity. He barely made it in last year and almost got beat by NY Racing car. And Jimmy Johnson's luck the last couple years in NASCAR has not been very, very good. But if he can make the Daytona 500 this year and not get caught up in the incidents, he may have a chance to win his third Daytona 500. He'll be looking to do that with the Legacy Motor Club team and organization in 2025. Up next, up at the 88 car for Trackhouse Racing. This will be driven by Shane Van Gisbergen, who joins the team on a full-time basis in 2025. SVG showed a lot of speed at the Cookout Clash this past week, and I think that Shane Van Gisbergen could be a sleeper pick to run really well at Daytona. In his first Xfinity Series start, he finished in 11th, was very competitive there, and then Atlanta, he finished in 3rd position. I think SVG will be one to watch out for. He's got Red Bull sponsorship on the car as well. He'll look to do really good in this year's Daytona 500 with Trackhouse Racing. Up next, how about the 91 car for Project 91? This is a Trackhouse Racing entry, and Elio Castroneves is going to be the driver. Now, Elio Castroneves is already locked in and guaranteed in this year's Daytona 500 because of the OPE that will be coming into place this year. I expect Helio Castroneves to get up to speed pretty quickly. He's one of the most talented drivers in the world, in my opinion, a 4-time Indianapolis 500 champion. He'll look to do it this year. He could run more NASCAR races in 2025, but as of right now, the main focus for Helio is going to be locking his way into the 2025 Daytona 500, which he's already guaranteed a spot in. He'll look to gain experience in this year's Daytona 500. And finally, let's talk about the 99 car for Trackhouse Racing. This will once again be driven by Daniel Suarez. This could be Daniel Suarez's final Daytona 500 with Trackhouse Racing, as he is in a contract year with Trackhouse Racing. Luckily for Suarez, he is a solid super speedway racer, as he did win Atlanta Motor Speedway last year in a really awesome photo finish. He could be a sleeper pick to win the 500. He was up front a lot of super speedway races last year. I do think that Daniel Suarez could definitely be one to watch out for in this year's Daytona 500 with the Trackhouse Racing team and organization. So, that is going to be it for the official 2025 Daytona 500 entry list. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you can be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Who's your early pick to win the Daytona 500? Let me know it in the comments below. If there's any major news that does break later today, we'll discuss here live on the channel. If not, the next time you see me will most likely be a NASCAR news video that is dropping tomorrow. Then I will be likely doing an updated look at all the paint schemes for 2025. We'll have content of people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Connor Zilch, JGR Motorsports, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Eric Almirola, Cletus McFarland, all that good stuff will be coming out on the channel. Frankie Muniz, we'll talk about Connor Zilch, Nick Sanchez, all this stuff will be coming out on the channel as we get closer to the start of the year, kicking off officially for the other series. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.